Hello, my name is Alyssa Johnson.
And I am Lisa Benson, and we are District Behavior Specialists. This year, the district is focusing on further developing behavior supports and interventions. As part of getting this work started, we held workshops over the summer that were attended by administrators and mental health staff from most buildings. This presentation is an abridged version of the 3-hour workshop offered this summer. This presentation is divided into 3 parts, with opportunities for discussion and reflection between each video, as well as an opportunity to ask questions and give feedback via surveys emailed to you prior to this meeting. Our goal for this presentation is to create common understanding of the multi-tiered framework for behavior supports and review the process guide for supporting behavior at Tiers 2 and Tiers 3. The process guide that will be shared with you today includes feedback from those that attended the summer workshops. Hopefully, this will allow us to continue the work of developing behavior supports at all tiers of intervention, because sometimes this doesn't work.
Our learning targets today will be: I can describe the multi-tiered system for behavior support and interventions and why it is important. I can identify when to move between Tier 1 and Tier 2 behavior supports. I can identify when to move between Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavior supports. Today, we will give a brief overview of why we provide behavior supports and share a new process guide to help teams be efficient and thorough as they support student behavior needs. So why do we provide behavior supports? Just like we need to teach our youngest learners the basics of letters and numbers, we also need to teach all students the basics of behavior and emotional intelligence. Some students come to us with a base knowledge and do great with general classroom structures. Others need additional behavior support. Behavior supports allow school teams to implement supports using a positive, proactive, systems level approach. We will talk a little bit more about this later. When supporting student behavior, it is our goal to understand the function of that behavior. Behavior always falls into one of 4 categories. Is it attention? Is the student seeking positive or negative attention from adults or peers around them? Is it escape? Are they looking to get away from work or social situations? Is it access to tangibles? Are they trying to get something like electronics or food? Or is it sensory based? Are they doing that behavior simply because it feels good? It is our job to help each child find a positive behavior pathway to meet their needs. It is in the best interest of the students to meet their behavioral needs in the least restrictive environment. When possible, our goal should always be to prevent placement change and support students where they are.
As stated in our learning targets, we want teams to feel confident in knowing when to move between tiers of behavior support. But first, we want to make sure everyone is clear about what PBIS is and what types of supports could be available within each tier. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Supports and Interventions. The supports and interventions are organized into tiers. Behavioral data and research-supported indicators are used to determine when to add additional layers of support. This is the RTI pyramid, which provides a visual for the tiers of support. Some of you watching may be thinking, this pyramid looks familiar. I remember learning about the RTI pyramid in regards to academic supports and interventions. When thinking about academics, Tier 1 is classroom instruction. Tier 2 consists of short-term interventions targeting specific academic needs. Tier 3 supports are long-term interventions for academic needs that have been resistant to short-term interventions, or the student has multiple areas of need or disability that need to be addressed systematically and concurrently. The RTI pyramid is also used to represent how behavior supports and interventions are organized. When people refer to PBIS, they are referring to all of the tiers of behavior support in the RTI pyramid. PBIS also includes a data-driven decision-making process used to determine when to add additional tiers of support or change interventions within the same tier. Some of you might be thinking that CARE is PBIS. To be clear, teaching CARE expectations is just one way that we support behavior at Tier 1 within the PBIS framework.
Let's look at what type of supports and systems would be found in Tier 1. Tier 1 supports are for all students in Webster. You will see the visual that Tier 1 is the shape of the entire pyramid. Tier 1 supports and systems work to prevent problem behavior and identify, interrupt, and correct low intensity problem behaviors. Supports and systems that are examples of Tier 1 supports include, but are not limited to, explicitly teaching care expectations for areas throughout the school building, planful ways of acknowledging expected behaviors, strong classroom behavior management, teachers knowing what behaviors should be classroom managed versus office managed, specific programs for all students to prevent problem behavior such as web and link, and the teaching of specific skills to build emotional health, such as our social emotional learning lessons, the teaching of essential skills in the classroom, and the practice of mindfulness. Finally, the Tier 1 framework also consists of consistent and systematic ways of addressing problem behaviors, data tracking to identify what locations within the school building may need additional support, such as the bus or cafeteria, and developing a systematic way to collect data to identify individual students who may require Tier 2 and or Tier 3 supports.
Supports and systems in Tier 2 address low-intensity problem behaviors that have not been adequately supported by Tier 1 supports alone. Research-based indicators of failure to graduate and data collected on specific students are used to determine which students are in need of Tier 2 supports. Tier 2 supports are intended to be short-term interventions targeting skills that students need in order to meet behavioral expectations and achieve overall social emotional health. Tier 2 supports could include, but are not limited to, small group or individual short-term non-mandated counseling to teach strategies for emotional regulation, social cognition, transitions to new school or program, planning and organizational deficits. Another example of Tier 2 supports could be a formalized check-in, check-out program. Problem solving using the function-based thinking model can also be part of Tier 2 supports. Finally, development of a behavior support plan may also be included in Tier 2 supports. Tier 3 supports are long-term interventions for behavioral needs that have been resistant to short-term interventions, are severely disruptive or dangerous to self or others, or the student has multiple areas of need or disability that need to be addressed systematically and concurrently over long periods of time. Tier 3 supports could include, but are not limited to, long-term mandated counseling, having behavior be assessed through a formal FBA process, and the development and implementation of a behavior intervention plan.
This concludes video 1, which provides reasons why we use behavioral supports in the schools, explanations of the PBIS framework, and explanations of the tiers of behavior support within the PBIS framework. Please take a moment to click on the Google Form links that we emailed earlier this week. This will give you a brief 1 to 2 minute chance to reflect and discuss with others around you and ask questions of us or give feedback that you may have.